Welcome to this week's The Show Will Go On Business Survival Series webinar. We're on week 3 of our pandemic response for the live events industry. Thank you all for attending. I am, of course, Tom Stimson, your host. By now, hopefully you know who I am, but I know we have some new folks because we have over 200 new registrations just this week. Need to know that I've been in the AV industry for a really, really long time. Several recessions ago is when I got started, 1983 officially. So I'm president of the Stimson Group. I've been consulting and advising the professional audiovisual industry since 2006. I've been writing for it and teaching since long before then. So I'm officially one of the old timers now, and I'm going to share with you what I know about how we deal with some of these things. Now, I'm not in this alone. I do a lot of this stuff, and I appreciate the fact that so many people look to me for information, but Avixa is helping us out here. We're trying to make this work. Avixa is supporting live events. Go to avixa.org, get on their mailing list. You can find out what they're what they're doing. They have a free basic membership, free basic individual membership that you can sign up for. That will give you access to free training online until June. All of their training is free for members at the basic membership level on up for a limited time, so take advantage of that. A lot of the information that we're getting this week, I got from the U.S. Travel Association, and they are a lobbying organization which Avixa has been working with to get the professional audiovisual and live events industries included in the meetings industry under the travel category. So we are being represented in Washington for you U.S. folks. So we're part of the travel industry stimulus package in there. So there is money that is earmarked for us. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means when other money runs out, our money might still be there. I have no idea. But it's nice to know that Avixa is doing all this for us. I have another announcement from Avixa towards the end of the webinar, so stay with me. All right, as you guys know, I talked to a lot of folks throughout the week. I'm still doing phone calls, free phone calls for people, and I'll tell you more about that at the end of the webinar. So please keep reaching out. You're helping me understand what's going on in the industry. So the question this week, and every week I look at what are we going to talk about next week, and it's really has a lot to do with what's on your minds and where your minds are evolving to, what kind of questions I'm having to answer. So what do we do now? We just can't sit here. Some of us have been in quarantine for 2 or 3 or more weeks already, and we're getting a little stir crazy, and we're a little frustrated that our industry is impacted far more than other industries, and what can we be doing now that everybody's furloughed and we're all sitting on our hands? So I'm going to try and touch on some of that this week, satisfy some of that need you have to be working on your business. But first, let me bring you some up-to-date information on some other things. Last week's webinar, very briefly, we talked about cash flow needs. The message here was how far out you last depends on how far out you plan. So I've been telling people to plan at least through August or September. I think by the end of today's webinar, you'll see that I'm really telling you to plan out now through the end of 2020 and even into 2021, because I think we're in for a pretty long haul, and I'll talk more about that later. You're not going to get through this, and your business probably won't survive unless you're a rare, fortunate entrepreneur without getting some sort of outside money. You're going to need to get some investments in. We have a loan program, and I'll talk a little bit about CARES, but I am not an expert on this. I get my information from the same places that you do. This is very much evolving, and I'll talk more about that. So the CARES Act. So here's the brief summary of the 3 types of loans that are in CARES that I'm aware of. Actually, there's a 4th one. The business interruption loan, which is one everybody's excited about. It's the payroll protection program, which will allow you to borrow about 2.5 times your monthly payroll. And that amount will be, or a portion of that will be forgiven of that amount that gets applied to keeping employees. I don't know all the rules. I just know that it's out there and banks are learning about it. The Treasury Department, the SBA, The Chamber of Commerce are pushing this information out as they come to understand it. It's only a few days old, folks, so we're still learning. There's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is what I was thinking was the fourth one. You can apply for that right now. The link is on the website. I've posted it on Facebook. There's a $10,000 advance that you can get, which will probably be converted into a grant. It may help you in as little as a week. So particularly if you're a freelancer, self-employed, smaller business, grab that money right now. It's yours. Go get it. That'll help pay a few bills, keep a few things going. I applied for it. I got bills to pay, so take advantage of that. And then there's also an express loan program, which have loans up to $1 million that can be set up as a revolving line of credit. So there's different ways that the SBA, different programs that they have for you, and most of these will be administered by your bank. So call your bank. However, your banks are saying, hey, we're just now figuring this out. So I've gotten emails throughout the day saying, hey, our bank just announced that this is live. We can do this and that. So get with your bank, get with your business bank and find out what they can do and how you can apply for these things. The SBA application link is on my website, but you can do this through your bank. They will handle most of the administration, which is a little scary, but that's the way it's going to go. It's going to take a few more days to get all the information out there. It's going to take probably a few more days for all the banks to universally have this information in the US. And they're still waiting for a little bit of guidance, so just be patient. So go to sba.gov for your disaster loan application. That's that $10,000 loan. It says it takes you 2.5 hours to fill out. I did it in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. You can have access to a small business administration counselor where you can schedule some time and ask them questions about how to apply some of this to your business. I'm sure they're much better informed than I am ever going to be. And then do what we learned last week about your cash flow calculations. I have serious concerns about some of you bringing back employees before you have revenue, even if there's a partial offset grant from the government. I don't know how this is all going to work out or play out for some of you. So do some math. There will be some out-of-pocket costs that you're not going to get granted. So you are taking a certain amount of risk in doing that. And if you're not going to have revenue for 3 or 6 or 9 months, bringing back employees for a couple of months, actually it'd be 3 months up until the end of June, might not be the best thing for you. So you'll have to look at your individual situation and see what makes sense. That's why you talk to your banker, talk to your CPA and your other advisors and figure out what's best for you. Let's see. Remember, you can post stuff in the Q&A box at any time. I will answer them as quickly as I can get to them. If you put a really long question, I will probably skim over it and not get to it, but I'm happy to answer questions by email afterwards. But get your questions in there and keep them coming, and I will have plenty of time at the end of this to talk. So back to our original question here. What should a workaholic problem solver be doing now? I mean, we're in the show industry, most of us. We do shows for a living. We're very much in the problem solving mode. That's what we get paid for. This is how I'm wired. I'm wired for crisis, because a show is just a series of crises, with interminable boredom sprinkled in between. So we need to do all of those things. So what can you be doing? And my message is going to be very much focus on being future ready. You loved your business. You had a great 2019. You have had a pretty good first half of the first quarter of this year, and then March happened. Right? Remember that business fondly. You need to focus on the business that you're going to become. We'll talk more about that today. So when we're going through this process, you have first thoughts. You have first thoughts and second thoughts. And your first thought very often has been internal. Most of my early phone calls and my early messages out when we were trying to understand what was going to happen and we weren't shut down yet and all of our jobs hadn't canceled was, well, we're going to have some free time on our hands. Let's clean up the warehouse. Let's fix our rental software. Let's do those job descriptions we've been talking about. God forbid you actually do employee reviews. Let's look at our pricing. So you have all these things that you could do, and those are your internal thoughts. And they're great first thoughts. There's nothing wrong with anything on this list. But they're all based on the premise that you're going to get back to doing business per normal soon. While there's probably value in doing most of these things, I'm going to challenge the idea that we're going to get back to a business as normal where those are the right things to do. And it made me think of one of my favorite phrases. And this was, I had a roommate. He grew up as a missionary, so he has some very interesting, pithy phrases. And one of them was, if we had some ham, we could have ham and eggs if we had some eggs. And this was a tribute to being poor. It's a great idea to have ham and eggs, but we don't even have the eggs. And sometimes those first thought things that we're trying to do are predicated on the fact that you have the other things to do it with, or the need to do it for in the future. We don't have eggs right now. There's a lot of ham we could probably do, but think twice about these things, and that's why I want you to get around to your second thoughts. Second thoughts become external, and many of you are there right now. You're calling me saying, what should we be doing? We need to be reaching out to customers. How can we help in our community? Shouldn't we be marketing? What's appropriate for all of this? These are good questions. This is the second thoughts part of your evolution into this future world that we're finding our way into. So yeah, let's ask these questions, and I'll give you a couple of things to think about as you're doing that. While you're in second thought mode, I keep notes. Those of you who follow me, I use these dollar notebooks, composition notebooks, and I'm actually on the end of my second full book just for the month of March. So now we're April. I usually go through about maybe 3 of these a year. I'm going to go through 3 of these in 45 days. So I've got a lot of notes here. Here are some of the things that I've been telling folks about communicating. Before you start communicating with your customers, before you put on your marketing hat saying we need to talk to customers and drive business, assuming you're over the idea of doing streaming events from your warehouse, you've got that out of your system, but you need to communicate. Ask yourself these questions. What are the points that you want to make? What is it that you want people to understand with the communication? Very often we just communicate without thinking about what it is that we're actually trying to communicate. We just think the words will come out and we'll get there. Think about, what do you want them to do? If you're going to communicate, what's the action you want them to take? And it's okay to say, we just want them to be informed, and that's fine, but make sure that you're only informing them, right? So don't lose the purpose of the message, which is to inform. If you want them to feel or think something, or what should they do as a result of this, make sure that you understand that for yourself so that your words will start to line up with that outcome. Think about breaking it down into smaller pieces. I'm on a lot of mailing lists, and I've seen some enormous communications from organizations and from companies like yours where they're trying to share way too much information. They're trying to say too many things. Can you break it down into smaller pieces? Make it easier for people to digest. And is there a bigger thing you're trying to get to? Understand what that is, and don't get there too soon. Right now, it's not a great time to be selling stuff. A lot of marketers have picked up on these clues. We've seen a lot of things come off of our social media feeds. A lot of advertisements have gone away. Think about your timing. We may be 3 or 4 weeks into this, but the rest of the world is really only on or in the US, is only on their second week of this. They're not ready for some of the messages that we feel urgently are important to us, which is, please, we're ready to be hired, hire us. Now, if I'm going to communicate right now in the current climate, based on what I just said, what I would recommend is find a way to help your customers. If you're going to call your customers, the question you should be asking them is, what can we do to help you? Is there anything at all that we can do to help you? You're not asking them for business. Ask them sincerely, how can you as a company help their company and help them? And you'll be surprised at what the answers are. If you're not trying to attach it to a piece of business, say, I'm not asking you to spend money. I'm asking you what do you need? We'll help. So some suggestions. Zoom's kind of busy right now. There are a lot of people who don't know how to use Zoom or any other video conferencing software as a service. Maybe you do, though personal experience, a lot of you don't, but some of you really know how to use this. Set up a hotline, send it to all your customers. Say, hey, we have people standing by to help you on Zoom. If you're in a call right now and you can't get somebody to work, call us, we'll help you. You have the ability to create a call center. If you've got voice over IP telephone, everybody can work from home and be on a call center, and you can do outbound calling for clients. You can provide home tech support at any one of a number of things, like their the installation in their building or the stuff that they're doing themselves, or just help them figure out how to get Disney Plus on the television so the kids will leave them alone while they're working. All of these things are important and valuable, and you can be part of that conversation. It's okay to schedule site visits knowing that you may have to postpone them, but right now corporations are thinking, man, if we had a corporate communications studio, I sure would like to put my CEO in front of something that would make him look stately so that we can give announcements to our customers and to our team. Is that something they want? Is that something they need? Put it on the calendar. It may be a few weeks before you can get to it. But again, you're having a conversation and you're offering them help. Research video conferencing products. Headphones, boom mics are fantastic for doing these types of calls. I wish more people used them. It would cut out most of the problems that people have with video conferencing just by having a decent headset and mic. Teach them how to use multiple monitors, how to do a multi-camera management. I could theoretically switch between cameras, which would just probably be distracting for this call. But all of that can be done. Learn how to do it. If you have the ability to create graphics or videos, video animations, there's a lot of things you can do to help people out with. So this is just an example of things that you can outreach to people and say, do that. Figure out what your version of this is. And if you're ready to communicate, get on it. But right now, we're in help mode. Help people out. We'll get around to asking for money and doing things for money a little bit later, but right now it's best just to help people. Charitable work. I'm just going to put my plug in here. The biggest need I see right now in the communities that I'm talking to, and the things I'm paying attention to, is food banks. Right now there's a lot of gig workers out there with no income and no way to buy groceries, and food banks are busy. Most of the volunteers at food banks are elderly people, retired people who can no longer go out into the public and do that kind of work. They're desperate for volunteers. So if you're putting people back to work or you're keeping people on payroll and they're itching for something to do, slap on a company shirt and go down to the food bank and volunteer a few hours. They're very aware of the social distancing things. They have the supplies, masks and gloves that you need to do that effectively, but you can certainly bring your own. Do that. Why not do that? We have so much power in our businesses to do these kinds of things. We just don't usually have the time to do it. Well, we got time now, right? You do charities. You do shows for charities. Check in with them. Ask them that question. What can we do to help you? Listen to anything. And then if you have a solution for them, you might offer it up. You'd be surprised what having people dialing the phone could do for the charities that you work with, just to deliver messages and check on the people that they need to check on. Lots of good stuff there, and I think you'll find a lot of your employees would welcome the opportunity to do some of these things. You just need to organize it. You need to support it. You need to be behind it. You need to lead in order for these things to happen. Don't just put it upon them to organize it themselves. You've got to get behind it and support it. Now, that gets us through second thoughts, but third thoughts is when we start thinking about the future. We can't answer all the questions. There aren't a lot of concrete answers about the future, but we need to be asking these questions over and over and over again until they start to form and we start getting better and better answers until we can act upon them. This is where your third thoughts need to be. So, when is the future going to be? When is that future? And what are we going to do when it happens? And who are we going to do it for? Where are we going to do it? Are we going to be able to go back to venues, or are we going to be doing something else? How is this all going to work? Okay, this is time to put your strategy hat on and think differently about your business. So, you ready? Let's do a little bit of business stuff for a little bit here, all right? I want you to do a quick self-assessment here. You can write this down, put your answers down, just keep your numbers in your head, whatever you want to do. Thinking about your business, this business, which right now is in stasis, you're down to a skeleton crew, you're kind of wondering what's going to happen next. Instead of thinking about how are we going to be the company we used to be, I want you to understand things about that company that you might want to work on while we're having this downtime. So think about last year for many of you, I think everybody has told me on their phone call that 2019 was probably the best year they've ever had. The first quarter of 2020 was like, this is so fantastic. Everybody was looking forward to things. They went out and bought, 200 tiles of LED wall to do their shows in March and April, and well, here we are. Think about that company, that really successful company that seemed to be thriving, and ask yourself these questions. 0 means this is never true. 5 means it's always true. If it's sort of true, you're somewhere in the middle. Pick your number for you. Do you seek deposits from your customers for next month's jobs so that you can pay this month's bills? Do you do that all the time? You do that sometimes? You never have to do that. All right? Give yourself a ranking. Question number 2. We have 1 or more jobs per year that exceed 10% of revenue. Your total revenue last year was $2 million, and you have multiple jobs that are $200,000 a piece. You need to answer 5, right? These are called windfall jobs, and we'll talk more about them in a little bit. We're in a seasonal industry, right? The year goes up and down. We have good months and bad months. If you can trace most of your profit to 1 month or 1 quarter, if that's always true, give yourself a 5. Now let's think about this. If you get to the end of the year and your net profit is $100,000, and you had a month with $100,000 of profit, technically that month was all of your profit for the year, which means the other 11 months did not contribute at all. Think about that. So over the past 5 years, you have grown less than 20%. So think about 5 years ago. If you were a $2 million company 5 years ago, and you're a $2.2 million company now, you haven't grown at all. You're $2.4 million. You've barely grown 20%, not accounting for inflation. So are you actually a growing company, or are you pretty much flat? And I don't care that you had a $3 million year. All that matters is where you were 5 years ago and where you were at the end of last year. The ups and downs in between don't count. And think about your balance sheet. If more than 10% of your revenue goes to debt service, it won't hit your P&L, it doesn't affect your profitability, but if you're a $2 million a year company revenue and you're spending $200,000 a year in debt service to pay back loans or leases, then you need to answer 5, or a smaller portion less than that, right? So great. Everybody got a ranking for themselves, or the best that you know about your company? What I would do with this self-assessment is that you need to understand how inherently healthy your business model is. And if you scored less than 5, then just relax. You're doing something right. You should probably be given the webinar. Matter of fact, you can do it next week. Give me a call. I'll get you set up. If you're between 5 and 10, you probably have a few tweaks that you need to make. Okay? 10 to 15, you're looking at some minor restructuring. We're past tweaking. There's something that's got to fundamentally change in how you do business. 15 to 20, you're really on the wrong track. There's business plan changes that need to happen. You're either picking the wrong customers, the wrong core business, your pricing model and structure, your operational response, something is flawed. And anything above 20, we need a new business model. Okay? Somehow it got out of control. You went off the rails somewhere, and it happens to all of us. I mean, most of us are not business people or even entrepreneurs by trade or training. We are accidentally entrepreneurs. We were good at something, and all of a sudden the company grew up around us, and here we are, right? So you got there legitimately, but at that point, if you're hitting 4s and 5s on all of these self-assessments, there's more things to fix than there are to keep. All right. Now, here's the good news. Yeah, remember that movie? What was it? City Slickers with Billy Crystal? I think I've talked about it a couple of times. This is a do-over. A lot of you have a do-over just simply by the virtue of your business is not sustainably viable, it's not scalable based on your past performance. But for everybody else, we have a do-over because business is gone. We're starting from zero. We're all startups again. When business starts to come in, you can't take the, you know, the business that you were and throw that company at this new little bit of pocket of business. You're going to be a much smaller business, and how are you going to react to that? So do you have a core business? Do you understand how much of the market that you actually have for the things that you do in your core business? Do you know what part of your business, of all the things you do, what parts are going to come back first, which customers are going to call first, and why? And ask yourself the question with your third thoughts, are we better off being a startup again and redefining all of those things? Now I've got some bad news. Somebody sent me this morning, and again, you guys send me lots of stuff, and I look at as much of it as I can. But this is a very simple graphic, and it's not particularly new or anything. It was just a very sobering reminder. And what this graphic on your screen says right now. Let me back up a bit. Remember, you know, people, the municipalities were saying, oh, groups less than 100 can meet. Then it was 50. Then it was 20. Then it was 10. And I couldn't understand why, if there's a chance that you could get sick or somebody could transmit the virus, what difference does it make what size the group is? But here's what they were responding to. They were responding to this kind of a chart that says, if there's 100,000 people out there who are known to have the virus, okay, what are your chances of somebody contracting it at a gathering with 10,000 people? And the chances are 45%. There's a 45% chance that someone is going to contract the virus as a result of going to a hockey game if there are 10,000 cases in the US, not just in your region. Now, there's not a cure for this virus. All we can do is stem its communication by isolating people until such time there is a vaccine, which best case scenarios we're hearing end of the year. If that's all true, and if that's how it plays out, most of what we do in the live events industry will not be allowed to happen, even if we are released from our homes. So put that into your hopper as you think about your business and you decide what's really urgent, what do I need to do next? You have some time and you have the impetus to think clearly about your business and come up with the plan that deals with it with a potential devastating, even more devastating reality than what we've been talking about, not having revenue for 4 months. It could be 9 months. It could be longer. So breathe. So let's get real. Let's get realistic about this. With this information, knowing that we have this going on, we need to take a look at our businesses, and here are the questions that I would be asking about my business. Coming out of this, however it comes out, we have a vaccine, we can start having meetings again, we've got this contained, we're ready to go to business. We hope there'll be pent-up demand. There'll be lots of people who want to gather for one reason or another. We'd like to all get on an airplane again. What do you need to know? Well, let's start with your customers. Okay, what will your customer base look like? And we want to start with what you've done in the past. I think we all know, we may not be in complete non-denial, but we all know that we're not going to go back to a business that's, you know, if we were $2 million in 2019, we aren't going to suddenly be a $2 million business again. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to come back that way. So we're going to talk about realistically what's going to happen. So think about the types of revenue that you have. Typically, when I sit down with an organization, we can figure out there's usually about 4 types of revenue in their portfolio, in their business portfolio. There's what we call the pickup business, that monthly business that comes in at the last minute, whatever last minute is for your business. It's usually transactional business. There's the bread and butter work, which is that stuff that you make money on. It's easy to do. You can do it all the time. There's the portfolio gigs, which are the ones that you want to feature on your website. The things that use a lot of your capabilities. They're a little bit of a stretch, but they're fun to do, and the numbers are big. We enjoy that. And then there's the mega projects. These are what we aspire to be. We chase these large revenue gigs. They usually suck the wind out of us. They cause other jobs to not happen, and we chase away business because we're doing it. Mega projects, or as I call them, windfall projects, are another bucket. Now, let's understand these a little bit better. Who are the example buyers for these types of things? Do this exercise with your business. Write down who these companies are so we understand who buys the services that you do. How much revenue does that bread and butter work represent, or portfolio gigs represent? How much is the actual revenue? And then what's the average variable gross profit or variable cost associated with that? In other words, how profitable is that segment of business? Do a little bit of analysis here because this is going to be very, very important. Now, thinking about pickup work, this is usually a subset of your core business. If you're a production rental company, this would be dry hire rentals, right? The B2B sub rentals, that sort of thing. This is typically going to be your first revenue opportunities coming out. It's a very small portion probably of your business. It's going to be a very small amount of money starting out, but that's what your first revenue is going to look like. Coming out of into recovery, whenever that is, kind of be a moving target. You don't really need to recall your staff to support that. Understand what it takes to support that, and don't overcommit staff to do that. Now, and don't ignore this work. This work is a leading indicator. I got a little angry with a client the other day because they were ignoring an opportunity that came to them to do something just last week. Well, they sent everybody home. They let everybody off. They didn't want to bring people back in. It was a $5,000 LED gig. Why wouldn't you do this? Well, it's a lot of trouble. So you have no idea how important that piece of work could have been for you. Coming out into recovery, every piece of work like that's going to be important. You're a startup. When you were a startup, you did anything for anybody that they asked until you didn't have to do that anymore because you were too busy doing your core work. Take the work that you can get. Pickup work will be great, and it'll come back first. Bread and butter is often not the sexiest work to do. And a lot of you is what I call general AV or meatball AV. That's an affectionate term. It's not sexy, but it'll pay the bills. When that business starts to come back, it is going to be a buyer's market. So get your inner resentments about selling at a lower price out of the way. We can't have that. You're not going to be successful in recovery mode if you're worried about the fact that, well, you got paid twice as much for this a year ago. It's never going to be a year ago. Get your head around what it's going to be worth and do it. This also will take very minimal full-time resources. You can bring in ad hoc labor as you need. You can bring in temps. You can bring in part-time staff to do fulfillment. You don't have to bring back a large crew to keep this going. When this returns on a regular basis and it becomes consistent, then you can look at bringing some staff back full-time to stay ahead of it and reduce your costs. Now, you want to market to these buyers now. Okay, this is who you need to be talking to because this is probably your recovery strategy. Think about what these people need. What would help them out? What's the kinds of meeting needs that they're going to have coming into recovery, and prepare for that. Now, portfolio gigs are this is what you often think you do. When I ask, say, well, tell me the kind of work you do, they're going to describe a portfolio gig when it generally only represents about 25% of their business and only 2% of their actual gigs. This is often a nice big bucket of revenue, but it's often not as profitable as we think it is because we're punching above our weight a little bit. We're a little beyond our capabilities, and we can't do it as profitably as, say, somebody this is their bread and butter work. This business is going to come back a little bit more slowly for you. Buyers are going to have a lot of options. There's going to be a lot of people going after this work because these are going to be the bigger jobs. There's going to be a lot of competition for it. Everybody's going to want to buy on price and sell on price. But know that going in and you'll do all right. Now, if you want to aspire to more of these gigs coming into the recovery, then right now you need to be marketing about your brand, talk about your business processes, things that will make you eternally evergreen viable. Establish your brand position for this type of opportunity so people know to call you when they come back. Now, the bread and butter gig, if we're marketing to those clients, we answer their frequently asked questions. How do I have a meeting? How can I make sure my meeting is sanitized? Those are FAQs. We answer those questions in marketing. In portfolio work, we want to answer the questions they should be asking. Why is it more important to have a highly professional crew than the crew that costs the least amount of money? That's the question they should be asking. That's what you want to answer in marketing. And then windfall jobs, let them go. They're not going to happen. They're not going to. They don't come back as quickly. There may be a few out there, but the time and energy it takes to go after them compared to what you could be doing to keep your doors open, there's just no comparison. It's often much lower margin work than everything else that you do. You'll have to use a lot of outsourcing. If you do happen to come across one, don't let it take away resources from everything else that you do. Matter of fact, you're better off outsourcing everything to do the windfall job so that your core team can do the core business. And I've heard every argument about how, oh, my guys really like to do those gigs. That's why they come on. They want a chance to do that. I hate to take that opportunity away from them. You got to do what's best for the business. So keep in touch with these folks, but focus on your portfolio and your bread and butter buyers, because that's what's going to help you recover. So the long and the short of this is focus on customers that will have the most work in the short term. So do the analysis. You have the data in your past work. You know who these people are. You know how much they spend. Well, how much they used to spend. Let's talk about how much they spend. Revenue. What might you expect from your various sources of revenue? We're going to do a little bit of math here. This is not terribly hard, but you need to analyze your business. So if you look at your monthly or quarterly, more accurately, revenue, you have a certain amount of business of pickup orders, bread and butter work, portfolio gigs, and mega projects. Coming out of this recession into our recovery mode, when we are finally in recovery mode, that first quarter, your pickup orders might actually reach 50% of that same quarter last year. Okay. Your bread and butter work might reach 20% of that same period last year. Second quarter, those numbers improve a little bit. Third quarter, they get a little bit better. Your portfolio gigs, it might take 2 quarters before any of them come back, or you get an opportunity to do one again. Be realistic about this. Mega projects, they're not even on the radar the first year. Matter of fact, they're not really on the radar the second year. So let's extrapolate this a little bit. So at the end of year 1, if business comes back and it grows as we hope it would, you might be back up to 75% of your pickup work and 60% of your bread and butter work, and maybe half your portfolio gigs. I mean, basically, it means you're going to be about half of your previous year's revenue, your 2019 revenue. Year 2, it'll get better. Year 3 is when it will finally pass your prior years. So for us, realistically, if let's just, for argument's sake, let's say that year 1 is 2021. Okay, you'll do half of what you did in 2019. 2020 is a wash, right? It's an outlier. It's not even in the formula anymore. 2022, you'll be back up to 2019 levels. 2023, you'll be passing up your 2019 levels, and hopefully much more profitable, much more healthy, much more scalable, much less overhead. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's how it kind of looks like. So if we had $500,000 of pickup orders in 2019, we should have 375 by 2021. Okay, very simple math here. Figure out what your math is. Okay, this is just example math. Look at your numbers, use your crystal balls, look around the corner, talk to your customers, and see how it might change. There will be less demand. Okay, there is going to be a lot more supply. Even if you do the same number of gigs, you're going to do it at a much lower price than you've been doing it in the past. Which leads us to the question about how do we increase our profit? Well, the quick answer to that is, in the live events business, you need to make higher margins on anything that has a variable cost. Labor is your largest variable cost. For most of you, it's 40% of your revenue is labor. That's where all of your costs are. That's where you should be making more money. Okay? You can offset the price increases that you need to make for labor by taking lower margins or deeper discounts on fixed resources like rental assets. All right? You've got to flip the formula that most of you have been using for a long time. Try and minimize equipment discounts and charge less for labor to get the gig is a formula for disaster. That's how you end up losing money. That's how you can be decimated. Your business can be wiped out with 1 or 2 bad months. Okay? Flip that formula. That's how you're going to make the money. That's how you're going to make it work. Okay? So the takeaway on this is that grow the business that will make you the most money with the least amount of overhead. All right? This is all about keeping your overhead down. So let's talk a little bit about overhead. Let me check questions here real quick. For a rental staging business, isn't our pickup work sub-rentals typically coming from other people's portfolio gigs? So if a portfolio gigs are down, I expect pickup work to be down as well. Yeah, but a lot of pickup work is also incidental needs. It's transactional business, right? It'd be end customers avoiding having a meeting and just picking up a few bits and pieces. It could be a delivery setup, but everybody's pickup work is going to be different based on what their portfolio, overall portfolio actually looks like. So yeah, there is some supply chain challenges in that the people who are normally renting from you, sub-rentals, don't need to rent as much. But that's not all of your portfolio, okay? There's a question here, how do you think the in-house AV companies will react? That's a dang good question. I wish I had a crystal ball. They are probably going to have much smaller staff spread across more hotels. So 1 director of AV and 4 hotels. Hotels are going to have to do something about their pricing and their contracts, just my opinion. I think what they've done, they've lived pretty high on the hog for the past several years. Their contracts are pretty egregious. I think they're going to have to eat some crow and make contracts more accessible, make cancellations easier to have, make less margin on third-party services. I think it does not bode well for in-house AV, but we will see what happens. All right, let me get back to overhead. So if we know that we need to reduce our overhead, then let's look at how we figure out what that is. So I just want to do a simple explanation of break-even analysis. I hear owners talk all the time about their break-even number. Matter of fact, in the first 2 minutes of a phone conversation over the past couple of weeks, the owner will say, yeah, we normally do this amount of money. This is how much overhead I have every month. And so here's how much revenue I need to have to pay for that overhead. And very often I'm finding that these calculations aren't complete or really accurate enough to actually do planning with. So I want to clarify what break-even actually means. So looking at this, we look at revenue minus cost of goods sold. Then you also have some fixed cost of goods sold. So you have some inside direct labor or costs or expenses that you wouldn't have if you didn't sell something. That gets us to a gross profit. Then you have what we traditionally call overhead, which is rent, admin, sales, executives, insurance, all of those things fall into overhead. And this is a very typical model here where if I've got, $7,000 or 7 million, put the comma anywhere you want, of overhead, then I probably have some fixed overhead in cost of goods sold in terms of technicians, project managers, and things like that to the tune of 5,000. So if I do no business, I lose $12,000 that month. Now, it's easy, simple math to say, well, that means that my break even is $12,000, except that's not actually how it works. If you got a $12,000 gig, you will have some variable outside costs that you have no control over, sub-rentals and things for equipment you don't own, travel expenses, whatever it might be. And it might be, 20, 25% of that job. On top of the cost of goods sold that you have built into your process which means $12,000 doesn't get you to net zero. It means that you're down 2,600. In Excel, if you'll figure this out for your company, get it off the napkin and into Excel, you can use a tool in Excel called GoalSeek, which allows you to say, hey, how do I make net profit zero based on a variable cost of goods sold that is a percentage of revenue, and I search for the revenue number that makes the number work. And what you find out in this scenario, if I have $12,000 a month in overhead, I need $14,600 a month just to break even. Right? So first thing you need to do is do your break-even analysis. Otherwise, you're going to go farther and farther and farther behind by not realizing how much work you actually need to get to break even, which, by the way, is never our goal. Right? Now, if we built a model of our business that didn't rely so much on fixed cost of goods sold, if I didn't keep so many technicians and project managers on staff, in other words, if I didn't staff for my busy months, if I staffed for my slow months, then I would probably have to outsource more. Okay, so that number would go up. Now, in that break-even model, if I can reduce my fixed cost of goods sold, in this case by 80%, I have the same overhead expenses. I have $8,000 each month that I have to pay no matter what. If I do an $8,000 gig, I'm still going to be short $2,500. I have to do a $12,000 gig to break even. But the good news is I just reduced my break-even gig down to a more manageable number. Right? Now, put another zero on this, put another comma in this, and now we're talking about a pretty big company, and we're talking real money here. So understanding how you make money is very, very important. So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what's the required overhead for a company half your 2019 volume? That's the challenge I leave you with today. Look at your business, and it's not half starting tomorrow, it's half starting September or December or January of next year. You're going to be a smaller company. What's the overhead that you need? Okay. If you have a business model that requires a lot of direct personnel, a lot of cost of goods sold people, then how should that affect your pricing structure? If you have to pay for people year round, but you only use them part of the year, how does it affect how you price things to make up for that difference? Okay. All of this is to get you to start thinking a little bit differently about your business. Okay. The reason that so many of the companies that I run into have low profit is that they're staffed for busy season and not their slow season. They're afraid to outsource. They look at outsourcing as subrentals as a money right out of their pocket, but they don't look at the people that they keep on staff and the overhead that they're accumulating as the same money, when in fact the overhead is more expensive than the outside direct expenses they may pick up on a monthly basis. So run your company more leanly, especially going into the uncertain times of not knowing what a recovery is going to look like. So if you retool your expenses and increase your cost of goods sold on a regular job, so when you do have revenue, cost of goods sold is higher than you're used to, you're going to reduce your overall gross profit, but your overhead's going to be down. Now, once you figure out what that new sweet spot is for you, your job as management is to figure out how to double the gross profit from there. Right? You can do better on gross profit than you're doing. That's your job. That's what we should always be working on, is how do we improve our gross profit? By better controlling our cost of goods sold, better controlling our pricing and margins at the sale, and then how we execute. So at the end of the day, you're trying to pick the business model that makes the most money the old-fashioned way all of the time. Make money the old-fashioned way by not spending it, and do that all of the time. So that's a pretty tall order for a bunch of people who are trying to figure out how to stay at home with the kids and the wife all day long, week after week after week. But we have a business to get back to, and we need to start thinking about our businesses. So I'm going to get to some questions in just a second, and thank you. Keep popping them in there. I'll do a couple of quick announcements, and I'll answer questions for as long as I last. Avixa, I told you there's another announcement from Avixa. They have created an online virtual event space for us to attend. I believe they're going to start this Friday, called the Business Survival Exchange. And they'll start with a recap of this week's webinar. They've got some moderators and facilitators to help all of you process the information that you're getting today. They will take discussion topics and put them into virtual breakout rooms and somehow virtually send you to those rooms to have a discussion on that topic. And then each room will come back and give a report to all the other groups of what went on in their discussion group. Sounds fantastic. Sounds like we'll get some great information. Remember, we are smarter together. This is a way to take your knowledge. I know I'm a fire hose. I'm funneling a bunch of information to you. You need to process it. You need to talk with other people about it outside of your organization. And Avixa is going to give us the way to do that. I'm very excited to see how this goes, and I hope many of you will participate. You will get an invitation that will go out by tomorrow morning, I'm promised, US time, to join this. And I honestly don't know what time it's going to be. We're moving really fast on all of this stuff. So bear with us. And apparently we have some time on our hands. These webinars, of course, are going to continue. The replay page, the one you got last week, is still good. Webinar-replay-survival-series. I will have it updated probably about an hour after this event is over with some links on there. You should still get an email follow-up that reminds you of where that is, but bookmark it. It's going to be good for a long time. And then next week's focus will have a lot to do with the questions that we get today and what I get over the next several days. We are getting closer to figuring out what 2020 Jumpstart workshops are going to look like virtually. We know how to deliver it. What we need to know is what do we need to deliver. So what kind of topics would be most helpful for you right now? Send me an email. I'm going to put some polls together to see if we can figure out where we need to be. I'm thinking the May timeframe or maybe late April, when we can start doing some business education, work on some business plan issues to help you make a better version of yourself in our 2.0 versions on our do-overs. I am still, for a limited time, doing free advisory calls. Just you can scan the QR code here, check my emails. It's on my signature. Go to my Calendly, book your time. It's 15 minutes is what we schedule. I always have a few extra minutes to give you, but I do these pretty much back to back. So I'll have to keep you to 20, 25 minutes, but don't hesitate to do this. I am happy to help. And for a few weeks longer, I will continue to do this. And then a final thought, and we'll do some questions here. You're probably never in your career going to get another do-over. You're never going to get another do-over like this in your business life. So don't waste it. This is a chance to shine. This is a chance to do something absolutely incredible with your business. Get ahead of the curve. All of you here are ahead of the curve. You reacted much more quickly than your peers have done. As we get new people in here, I'm finding more and more people who have done almost nothing in the past 3 weeks, and you guys are way ahead of the game. Imagine how ahead of things you're going to be in 3, 6, or 9 months from now. So take advantage of the do-over. Each one of these webinars, I'll bring you a little bit more information to help you execute that do-over, help you think about your business and plan that. So stay with us. All right. Whew. Let's do some questions, right? Let's see. Hang on, let me ollie out of a couple of these. All right. So how should we be communicating with our potential clients? Email, phone, social media only, personal reach outs? Yes, all of those things. The question is probably more about what's the frequency of each of those things. Email, we all have a little bit more time for email, and if your email is good and useful, we're seeing more interaction. The folks that do regular email marketing, and I'm one of them, I'm seeing more interaction on regular emails because people have time to respond to them. Phone calls are great. People can answer their phone. So if you have relationships where you can call somebody's mobile phone, I would take advantage of it. But remember, we're not there to sell them anything. We're just there to ask how we can help. Social media, yeah, why not? Remember, I'm pretty much a Facebook and LinkedIn person, and I'll just remind you of the differences in those two environments. Facebook is a backyard barbecue. People's shields are down. They're generally more opinionated, a little bit more colorful. They're more likely to have fun and play with things and comment on things. So how you communicate on social media in the Facebook world is completely different than what you do over on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has the unfortunate distinction that nobody on LinkedIn wants to be seen as vulnerable. Everybody presents themselves as fierce, strong competitors with great strategic thinking, and they would never expose the fact that their business is in the toilet and they don't know what to do next. So keep that in mind. Nobody wants to expose themselves as struggling on LinkedIn. They're all strong people on LinkedIn. So communicate to the strength. Help reinforce those strengths on there. So look at your messaging when you do that. Personal reach outs are always good right now. And I appreciate the fact lots of people check in with me. I get texts and emails and phone calls just to make sure I'm doing okay. How awesome is that? Yeah, so do those things, probably more than you need to. Don't forget your family. Okay, do you not think there is going to be some pent-up demand and some companies will fail, leaving less supply? I'm not confident about pent-up demand. I don't think meetings, what's the meme? This is yet another meeting that could have been solved by prevented by an email. I think we're going to find a lot of people who are figuring out how to get by just fine without meetings. So in the corporate meetings industry, I don't think there's going to be a ton of pent-up demand, particularly for the portfolio and the mega gigs. There will be some, but not what you would think. Will companies fail? Fewer companies will fail than you think. As I've said in the last webinar, it's really hard to kill a company in our business, a balance sheet business. Banks will always loan you money against your assets. They don't want you to default. Nobody wants you to go bankrupt. Everybody loses in a bankruptcy. They'll keep you going for a long time. You'll get credit extended. You'll get deferments on rent. A lot of folks can keep going if they will keep their expenses down and not force themselves into a personal bankruptcy, which will come back and affect their business. So I don't think the supply is going to go down. I think the supply is going to far exceed the demand in the marketplace, which is going to lead to some price erosion, which means you got to get comfortable with the fact that you're going to get less money for doing the same thing. Get over it. There's still money to be made. You need to run a better business model in order to keep more of that money. These are great questions, by the way. This is awesome. PPP funding is all about bringing back jobs, and to get it forgiven, we need to keep staffing up. How do you suggest working within that? I need clarification on the forgiveness side of it. I've had somebody tell me that they thought you had to bring back all of your employees as of X date, March 1. Those same people had to all be brought back in order to qualify. I don't think that's how it works. I need clarification on that. There's a lot of people who might be better off on unemployment, depending if you can't bring them back at full staffing levels or full pay levels. So each of you are going to have to do your own individual analysis on your cash flow assessments and your future business. If your business is not going to come back for 4, 6, or 9 months, I question the value of reinstating employees over a short period, just because you might get part of a loan forgiven in order to do that. You can get the loan anyway, use it to operate your business. It won't all be forgiven, but we're talking 4% interest over 10 years. You're not going to get much better money than that. So it's the right question. I don't have a definitive answer for you. Given the potential for a second wave of COVID-19 season, do you think corporations are going to risk planning national meetings? No, I don't think they're going to risk it in 2019 or 2020. I really don't think they're going to do it. It depends on how big that second wave is and when the vaccine is in place. But I think a lot of corporate travel is going to be suspended through the end of the year. We haven't even begun to see the number of businesses and industries that are going to be shut down. Retail is dying. All these retail stores and shopping malls, there's a model that suddenly is not going to be there. That's a lot of our economy. It's a big chunk of things that are going to go away. So I think there's going to be a lot of hedging and a lot of companies holding on to money as long as they can. And it would only be mission critical meetings that will be done, which of course will probably be much smaller than normal. And they'll figure out how to do it virtually, which we can help with, right? Right. Going back to profitability on labor versus rental gear, were you saying to work on making more profit on labor? Yes. So try to pay less and charge more? No. Try and charge more. No. And maintain, no. You're going to have to increase your rental discounts to client, raise your labor rates, charge less for the gear. Right now, most of you charge this much for gear and this much for labor, right? I'm making, for those of you on the phone, I'm using my hands crossly. So you charge as much as you can for equipment, 70% of the bill, and 30% of it is labor. Flip it. Make 70% of the bill labor and 30% equipment. Now you've got a scalable formula. Okay? That's how to run your business. Now, how do you sell that to clients? That's a whole nother discussion. They're used to paying a different way. They're used to you commoditizing labor. Shame on you for having done that for all these years. I've done it too. We've all done it. We have to change as an industry and quit commoditizing the labor, commoditize the commodities, which for most of us is rental equipment. So we need to make money in a different ratio from different places. Your variable risk and variable cost is in labor. That's where more of your margin should be. Your risk and cost on equipment is very low. You can afford to make less margin there. And remember, you're going to be running less overhead because you're going to run a business that outsources more, because supply demand, there's a lot of outsource, there's a lot of gig economy out there you're going to be able to pull from. Can we watch the archive of this show and others somewhere? Yes, yes. You saw that. I know you were paying attention. You saw that there's a replay page for this, and you'll also get that. You should get that in a follow-up email tomorrow. Let's see. Another question about, I've experienced that in-house are matching the price of outside production companies and not charging for rigging other than labor. They're using a sliding scale of dollars, giving money back to the hotel. Yeah, they're being aggressive. Of course they are. I've done 2 bids for October in the last weeks, and the client has shown my budget to the hotel. Unusual for this client to speak about it so openly. Yeah, in-house is going to be extremely competitive. They have no choice. You would do the same thing in their shoes. If every one of your clients brought you every other quote, you'd be matching it too and figuring out how to run your business model differently. So of course they're going to do that. It's supply and demand. In-house has the advantages that they are there. They are often written into the contracts. They're inherently convenient. The people who are buying at that level often don't know that they're not as good as you are. So they have a lot of advantages in the marketplace, but the last thing they want to do is be priced way above market and lose any opportunity to pay a commission to the hotel and thereby lose their position there. So yes, they're going to be more aggressive. All right, I had some freelancers raise their rates in this year. We will have some systems work after the lockdown is over, assuming May 1st. Do I pay them what I paid them before the lockdown or renegotiate? All right, so yeah, so your freelancers, your gig economy, yeah, I would hope, given the year that we just had and the year we were hoping to have, they should have raised. If I were still freelancing, I would have raised my rates by all means. Do I renegotiate? Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, they can keep their rate. You just might not hire them. And that's part of the gig economy. That's part of how this all works. When I was a freelancer, I set my rate. I needed to be realistic about what was going on. If my rate wouldn't get me gigs, I needed to reassess my rate. So they may need to reassess the rate in the current situation. I know all of you are going to hire people to do the job well. And that's going to be your first priority. You're not going to hire people just because they're the least expensive. But if you have a choice between A and B and they're both equally good, you're probably going to pick the one who's less expensive, and I wouldn't blame you. All right. So the only way to remain relevant now would be digital marketing. Is there any other way to remain relevant? How do you beat the competition? Digital marketing isn't the only way to remain relevant. You can do a lot of this within personal marketing, phone calls and outreach. But let's think about this. Even if you're a freelancer, digital marketing is your friend. You can communicate to a lot more people. That works for you 24/7. If I could make money advising freelancers, there's a lot of things I'd like to tell you guys about how to run your businesses better. You know, you're a freelancer, you're a professional. You should have a website. You should do all the things that your employers are doing to promote yourself and market yourself. You should have a newsletter. You should be notifying people of training that you've had and things that you've done, and gigs that you've worked on. That's how you remain relevant. Digital is kind of where it is. It's even more important now. Right now, Zoom sends me notices that say, "Hey, be aware that you're not going to be able to broadcast in HD. That they're going to throttle us down because there's so much demand on bandwidth." This is the new normal. We may send people back to the offices, but once they're hooked on video conferencing, they're hooked on video conferencing. So digital is how we're going to communicate with people. So figure out how to get good at it. Hey, guys, if you're using the chat box to send questions, I can't keep up with them there. Cut and paste it, stick it over there in the Q&A box, and I will try and get to it, okay? All right, here's a comment about Infocom canceling. From a safety perspective, canceling Infocom was the only decision Avixa could make. What is your opinion on how they communicated that the leading events associated in the world, saying that the world don't even think about have a meeting in 3 months? Yeah, it was the only decision they could make. We need to do what's good for everyone. The stories we're hearing right now, I mean, poor New Orleans is going to take a beating for Mardi Gras. Not that they could have stopped it. There's so many cases of even family weddings that have triggered huge amounts of people being infected. Yeah, the meeting industry, we're aware. I mean, safety comes first. I would never ask people to do that. So I think Avixa is absolutely the right decision. I think they're sending out the message we should all be sending out, which is stay home. Anybody who's telling you, whoa, you need to have meetings, this is overblown, is denying the reality of the situation. You're putting people's lives at risk. We absolutely have to get behind these things, even though it is a sacrifice for all of us. It's a sacrifice for everybody involved. It's a huge, huge hardship. But goodness gracious, this is, washing our hands isn't going to solve this. You got to stay home. We've got to quit gathering. We've got to quit having meetings. Okay? So thank you for Avixa for doing this. It was the right decision. And we need to think about this when we communicate to our audience as well. I don't want my company to have meetings. Okay? I don't want people having to come to my warehouse and do a streaming event. As much as I'd like to have the revenue, personally, if I were in that business, I wouldn't be promoting that. We know too much about how this is transmitted to even want to think about doing that anymore. But that's my opinion. And you asked my opinion. All right, just got an email from a banker, the application for the PPP loan program, they're accepting them starting on Friday. Good, yeah, pay attention, listen to your bank. Let your bank officer know that you're interested in this. Good job. Is this now the time to not bring back old timers in the shop who know where every item lives, even if we don't use that gear and should have dumped it long ago? I'm not sure the question that you're asking there is this an old timer who thinks that they should be the one brought back to work, or this is a young person saying, can we keep the old timers out of the shop finally? I think we have to look at our businesses differently and bring back the people that help us in what our new normal is. Look at your recovery mode. That's why this webinar starts you thinking about what recovery will look like. It's far enough in the future that you have time to reorganize your business and then make that decision when it's time to make that decision. All right. All right, so if we have not in 20 years used rental software but have wanted to, but for lack of time and money, is this the time to do that? It probably mostly setup times and have held us back since the startup costs are not really so expensive. Okay, all right, so getting into rental management software, depending on what path you choose, is not a tremendous amount of startup costs, but it's a lot of time and energy, and you're going to have the time and energy. So if you're looking at that decision, look at the viability of your business, um, the strength of your position coming back in. Is the company you're going to be in the recovery, does it also need that software you haven't used for 20 years, or can you get by with another year or two? That's a call that you're going to have to make. However, if you are going to do it, you don't need a lot of crew to get it set up. You just need time. I've managed a huge company, and most of the data input in there I did myself. So it can be done. So make that decision. There are some startup costs involved, but the big expense is time, and right now you probably have some. Regarding the discounting of gear, should we increase discount or lower the rack rate? Yes, either one, it doesn't matter. If you're a rental company and you're doing a lot of transactional rentals, then a rack rate matters, and you can sell from a rack rate and a discount. If you're a production company, or you're selling outcomes, your clients should never see a rack rate anyway. If you've listened to anything I've said in the past 15 years, your clients shouldn't be seeing rack rates. They should be seeing outcomes and costs. So how you get there, it doesn't really matter. If this is all behind the scenes, I would actually do neither of those things. I would get away from rack rates and discounts, and I would start putting in costs and adding margin to it, which is the exact opposite of a rack rate and discount. That's a longer discussion. I've done all sorts of webinars on that. We'll probably talk about that in one of these upcoming webinars. As I said, one of the things that we need to do differently about our businesses, selling from a retail price and discounting is not as smart as selling from cost and adding margin to it, which is pretty much how every other business entity does things. Okay. Let's see. Putting in a COVID clause for a conference. This is a terms and conditions question. What's the appropriate cancellation? Week, 2 weeks, a month? What's appropriate? It's going to vary by business. Probably as early as next week's webinar, I'm going to give you an outline of what your terms and conditions might look like going into the future. I get this question far too much to let it go any longer. It's really not time. You're not selling anything. But let's get that one out of the way. We need to have reasonable cancellation fees. Matter of fact, I'm opting for eliminating cancellation fees and having customers pay as they go for the work that you've done working up to a job, up to the point where they need to make the final payments so that you can go in and load in the job and execute it in the production world. So we'll have some formulas, some templates that you can work around and apply it to your business for whatever your core business is. And you probably will have terms and conditions that apply differently for transactional business versus that bread and butter rental versus that portfolio show. Then there's the mega events. But the same basic concept will work across all of them. With the hotel business being hit hard and CDC commandeering event convention centers, do you think there might be a shortage of meeting space with groups that had events booked already? We're already seeing some shortage of space in certain time periods. I know a lot of people are trying to reschedule events for October, November, and it's already the busy time of year, and the events that were booked there are still booked. So is there a shortage of space? There might be. Is there going to be a problem? Probably not. They may have to move. They may have to downsize. They're probably just going to pick different dates. So I think short term, while if we're still using convention centers for hospitals, there won't be any meetings and it won't matter. Interesting question. Okay. Somebody said that they heard that 75% of the employees had to return under PPP in order to be eligible. I don't have verification of that, but it's a little bit of information that you guys can research to see how you can take advantage of that. Okay, another question. Assuming smaller meetings come back first, do you think hotels with a contracted AV company may consider moving to a self-operation, do their own model? Well, I would say I would hope so. the non-national or international chain hotels, the independent hotels, might be looking at doing their own AV or contracting with local companies, much as we've done in the past. I think there's more opportunities to serve those hotels. That's the world I kind of grew up in, and there were companies like MVP, which their entire business model was based on teaching Marriott how to run AV in their own hotels, using their own staff and buying their own equipment. So I think there's an opportunity for that again. If I were in the hotel space, I would certainly be looking at putting that model out there for those hotels that don't need full service anymore. Yeah, and if I were a regional player, I would certainly be talking to all the venues that might become my new best customer. Any tips on balancing a focus or care towards the human experience, mental health issues we're all facing versus issues that might come up with overstepping boundaries or making people feel uncomfortable with something that can feel private or embarrassing? All right, I'll take this question. Yeah, right now we want to outreach to people, and there are different cultures in the world. Many years ago, I worked with a company. The owner was a lovely man, but he was Persian. He was Iranian, and the culture there is rather, I don't want to overcharacterize, but patriarchal. And it is normal for the employer to get involved in the personal life of his employees, which is something in the United States, American, we don't do that. So he very much felt to his employees like he was sticking his nose in their business. So there is that opportunity to overreach. What I think most human resources people will tell you, and I'm not a human resources expert, but they will tell you is make resources available, but you don't have to force people to use them, and you don't have to stick your nose into their business. All you can do is make it available. That open door policy is that you're always open to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening to folks if they want to talk, but requiring it, that's a little bit problematic. So you got to find that happy balance. Be helpful, be concerned, be empathetic, provide resources, but let people access it the way that they want to access it, or not. Some people do like to stew in their own misery for a little bit, and then they come around and maybe get the help that they need. So don't presume that how you would want to be helped is how other people would want to be helped, is what I guess I'm trying to say. All right. What's your thoughts on the future of the live industry? Long term, it's always going to be there. I mean, let's face it, we're a social species. We like to get together. There's a lot of value in that. Entertainment is huge. We'll get there. I'm a theater person. I mean, it's like I can't imagine a world without theatrical entertainment. It's just not the same watching it on a TV screen. I can't even watch those recordings of Broadway shows that were done for camera. I can't do it. It just doesn't do anything for me. So I think there's the live event industry is going to continue to happen. There's been so many times in my career in the past 35 plus years where something happened and we said, well, that's the end of the live events industry. And it's just never come true. We are going to get back together. We are going to meet. It's what we do. And probably stronger than ever. What we have to do as an industry is get better at making money in something that's potentially volatile. We now know what our risks are. At any given moment, something can happen that will shut down live events. And we've got to prepare for that better than we have been. How are we doing on time? All right, got a few more questions here. Somebody here says, I do a lot of scenic and drape rentals, so when do I see business come back? Drape, more than scenic, I think it's an early demand coming back. I mean, there's a lot of, when I'm watching the news and I'm watching these temporary spaces set up and I see all these pipe and drape stanchions with these privacy curtains setting up makeshift hospitals. And I'm going, man, who got that rental, right? There's a lot of things that you can put drape on that you may not think of. So focus on what your core business is, and there are other people who need your core business that you're probably not thinking of. You've probably marketed to one type of buyer, one type of customer. There are other places. There's a lot of industrial uses for the things that we do. I'll tell an old rental story. Back before a wireless intercom was like everywhere, in the early 90s, we used to do wireless intercom to do factory tours. And we had a regular client who regularly got about 18 drops of wireless intercom so that they could take dignitaries on a tour of their factory with closed headsets. You never know where your skills and your resources can be used. You just have to think outside the box a little bit and do that, which is really what strategy is all about. All right. Well, I can always tell when it's time to get to the end of the webinar, because if we start getting to more comments than questions. Yeah, red or white, Tom? Red or white? Yeah. I think it's going to be red tonight, definitely. Thanks for asking. All right. There's a few more questions here. I'll try and answer some of these online and share some of these on Facebook. Please join us over at AV Matters Facebook page. We have an AV Matters group where we're having these discussions, and I often answer leftover questions over in that forum. We get some nice dialogue. It's an easy way to consume it. Right now, there's a lot of people on Facebook, a lot more than normal during the day. So you can come hang out with us there and answer some questions. And man, yeah, good stuff, good stuff. So, all right. Well, here we are. Thank you guys very much for being with us, for getting that through another one. I will get this posted here shortly, and feel free to share it with anybody that needs to see it. And we'll get some more folks signed up. We had over 800 registrations today. We didn't quite get to our 500 limit today, which is fine because we have hundreds of people who watch the archive of this. So as long as people are getting the information and using it, that makes it all worthwhile. So you've been a great audience. Thanks for all the questions. Let's keep talking, and I'll see you next week. Take care.